Ever heard of the reverse attraction paradox, a fascinating phenomenon where the exact words you think would impress a younger woman often push her away, while seemingly counterintuitive phrases create instant attraction? And those are the exact phrases younger women secretly love to hear from older men. I discovered this by accident last winter, when my friend David, a 68-year-old professor, called me at 2 a.m. laughing. "You need to hear what just happened," he said. "Remember all those pickup lines and smooth talk techniques I was obsessing over? Well, I just accidentally said the complete opposite, and it worked better than anything I've ever tried." That night sparked a 6-month research journey. I studied hundreds of successful age gap couples, consulting relationship psychologists and uncovering surprise ring patterns that nobody's talking about. What we found: challenges, everything you think you know about connecting with younger women. In fact, the most powerful phrases, the ones that create genuine lasting attraction, are probably not what you'd expect. And in the next few minutes, I'll share exactly what they are, starting with the one word that changed everything for David. But before I reveal what David discovered that night, let me share something that might make you uncomfortable. Most advice about age gap dating focuses on the wrong things: your money, your status, or worst of all, trying to act younger. A groundbreaking study from the Authentic Age Bridge, Cambridge University's psychology department, turned this conventional wisdom on its head. After analyzing over 2,000 successful age gap relationships, they found something shocking. The strength of these relationships had nothing to do with wealth, looks, or status. Instead, it came down to specific communication patterns that created deep emotional connections. Here's where it gets interesting. Remember David's late-night call? What he accidentally stumbled upon that evening matched exactly what these researchers spent years discovering. In fact, he'd unknowingly tapped into what psychologists call the authentic age bridge, a phenomenon where age becomes irrelevant because of how you communicate. And it all started with a simple misunderstanding at a coffee shop. Picture this: David sitting at his usual coffee spot reviewing some work papers when he overhears a young woman at the next table struggling with a business plan. His first instinct to jump in and share his 40 years of business expertise, but something stopped him. "I was so tired of being seen as the old guy with advice that I decided to try something different," David told me. Instead of offering his wisdom, he simply turned and asked, "What's the biggest challenge you're facing right now?" The curiosity paradox. Next few minutes reshaped everything David thought he knew about connecting with younger women. Julia didn't just respond. She transformed. Her initial professional veneer melted away as she mapped out her startup's challenges on a napkin, eyes lighting up with each pain point she shared when another patron asked if they were father and daughter. Julia didn't even pause her passionate explanation about market validation. The most powerful moment: when Julia suddenly stopped mid-sentence and said, "You know what's crazy? Every investor I've met tried to solve my problems. You're the first person who's helped me solve them myself." Just by listening, this moment perfectly mirrors what the Cambridge study I mentioned earlier calls the curiosity paradox. Researchers found that older men who asked thoughtful questions were rated 3.7 times more attractive than those who shared their expertise unsolicited. Why? Because it creates intellectual intimacy, a deeper form of attraction in psychological terms that transcends age. The key is our asking what researchers call expanding questions. For example, instead of saying, "Have you tried this solution?" David asked, "What solutions have you already explored?" The difference might seem subtle, but the impact, well, you can feel it. But David's breakthrough. The breakthrough moment wasn't just about asking questions. The real magic happened when Julia mentioned feeling overwhelmed by negative feedback from potential investors. Instead of rushing to offer solutions or generic encouragement, David noticed something others had missed. "You know what stands out to me," he said, "the way you adapt your pitch based on each rejection shows remarkable resilience that's rare." Julia's reaction: complete silence followed by tears in her eyes. Nobody has ever noticed that she said, "Everyone just tells me I'm doing great, or that I look confident." This gets to the heart of what relationship psychologists call recognition chemistry. Her research shows that younger women aren't actually seeking compliments from older men. They're seeking understanding when someone truly sees the qualities they themselves value most. It creates an instant, emotional bridge. Think about that difference for the emotional bridge moment. Most men might say you're doing great or you seem really smart, but David's observation was specific, thoughtful, and most importantly, it recognized something Julia worked hard to develop. But there's an even deeper psychological principle at play here, one that explains why this type of recognition is so powerful. The conversation between David and Julia shifted into something unexpected when he made what he later called the biggest mistake that worked. Instead of dwelling on her current challenges, he accidentally started talking about the future, but not the future projection. In the way you might think, you know what would be fascinating? He said 5 years from now, when you're teaching other entrepreneurs how to handle rejections like you do, the insights you're gaining now are going to be invaluable. Notice what he didn't do. He didn't talk about his own future plans or tried to insert himself into her story. Instead, he painted a picture of her future that built on the qualities he genuinely recognized in her. A recent research study revealed something surprising when older men create what he calls independent future projections. Visions that empower the woman's individual growth. Attraction deepens naturally. It's the opposite of what most men do when they try to create shared future scenarios. Too quickly, Julia's response proved this theory perfectly. She leaned forward and said something that caught David completely off guard. "You know what scares me about older men?" Julia suddenly asked David. This is where most men would either get defensive or try to prove her fears wrong. But what David said next changed the entire dynamic of their conversation, actually. He said, pausing thoughtfully, "I used to worry a lot about the age gap too. Still do. Sometimes there's this constant pressure to prove I'm not too old, that I'm still relevant." He stopped thinking he'd said too much, but Julia's reaction stunned him. She moved to his table, leaned in and said, "That's the most honest thing anyone over 50 has ever said to me. This perfectly illustrates what a recent research discovered: the strongest age gap connections form when older men display confident vulnerability. It's not about exposing insecurities. It's about being secure enough to acknowledge them. Think about that for a moment. While most older men try to hide their age-related concerns, David's willingness to openly address them actually created deeper trust. But here's the fascinating part about what happened next. Now you might be wondering how to naturally apply what David discovered. Here's where most men go wrong. They try to use these insights as techniques or conversation scripts, but that's missing the entire point of David's transformation. Remember that first coffee shop moment? It worked because David was genuinely curious, not because he was following a script. The magic lies in authenticity, not application. Let me share a perfect authenticity, not application example. Another friend, Michael, tried copying David's exact words, asking about business challenges and future visions. It fell completely flat. Why? Because he was focused on the words, not the intention behind them. The key is understanding these core principles. Curiosity should come from genuine interest, not strategic questioning. Recognition must stem from actual observation, not planned compliments. Future visions should empower her journey, not serve your agenda. Vulnerability needs to be real, not a tactic. The research study we mentioned previously puts it perfectly. The strongest age gap connections form when older men stop trying to bridge the gap and instead focus on authentic connection. But there's one crucial warning I need to share about this approach. Remember how this story began. David's 2 a.m. call wasn't about a magical transformation or instant success. It was about the moment he stopped trying to be what he thought younger women wanted and started being genuinely himself. Here's what happened after that coffee shop conversation with Julia. They didn't end up dating, and that's actually the most powerful part of this story. They became close friends, and Julia started introducing David to her single friends, telling them, "You need to meet this man who actually listens and understands." This gets to the heart of what that Cambridge study really discovered: the most attractive quality in an older man isn't his wealth, his looks, or even his experience. It's his ability to create genuine connections without agenda. Think about what David learned. True curiosity beats scripted interest. Authentic recognition trumps planned compliments. Real understanding matters more than future promises. So here's my challenge to you in your next conversation with a younger woman. Forget everything you think you should say. Instead, be genuinely curious. Notice what others miss, share real insights, not rehearsed ones.